Good morning, Mr. Toby Dog. How are you, pal? You're excited for the start of another day? Good to see you, buddy. Good to see you. So there is a controversy I need to address. And so in today's video, I hope to provide you guys with as much clarity as I possibly can. Over the past week or two, Abby's breeder has made some allegations about us, and I gotta directly address them. Isn't that right, little Abby Dabby? Ready to come out? Come on out, girl. Good to see you. Yes. Good to see you. You have a good night? So yeah, as I was saying, in recent days, Abby's breeder has come out swinging for me. And there's even been kind of a coordinated attack on the farm. And I feel like I owe it to you guys to address the allegations, talk about the things that are true, talk about the things that are completely untrue, and hopefully put this controversy to rest. Because I really hate having to spill tea in a video. Release the Kraken! Sit. Good girl. So the quick 60-second recap of the situation is this. Back in March, we added a second livestock guardian dog, Abby, to complement our other Maremma livestock guardian dog, Toby. I wanted Toby to have a partner, and I also hope to maybe one day breed Toby and Abby. But because Toby Dog has such a diverse genetic line, what I found is that he was related to a lot of the breeders on the East Coast. And so after doing a little bit of research, I found a breeder out in California that I thought would be a good fit. I approached her about buying a puppy, and that's how Lady Abington ended up on the farm. Now, where the training for Toby was relatively painless and straightforward and easy, Abby has been a little bit of a challenge for me. She's actually really good with her obedience commands overall. Where I have the problem is she likes to play with birds. And seeing as how we are primarily a poultry farm and the reason we have our livestock guardian dogs is to guard our birds, this has been challenging. Abby, hey! Abby, no! Abby, no! Hey! Abby, no! No! Now, a lot of Abby's playful energy is rooted in the fact that she still is very much a teenager.
I'm just a baby.
But a fair amount of that is also rooted in the fact that her instincts are quite different than Toby Dog's. Oh, crap. Oh, no. Oh, no. You guys see that out there? You know, when I came out here this morning to start feeding and watering the birds, I noticed that there were a couple of cow pies, and I thought that was odd. But it wasn't odd, it just meant that my cattle are out. Come on, dogs, I'm gonna need your help. Pretty much what happens is every once in a while, a rambunctious calf will break loose. I think that's what's going on here. All right, Abby, are you gonna help me out here? Now let me try to make this video while rounding up cattle. Abby, tranquilo. Good job. Hey guys, what you doing out? I don't think this is where you're supposed to be. Yeah. You guys broke loose. How's it going, Jimi Hendrix? I got what you need, buddy. So after a lot of thought and consideration and consulting with some friends, as well as a few Maremma breeders, as well as a couple of vets, I ultimately came to the decision that I wasn't gonna ever try to breed Abby. Between the potential risk of her passing on a hernia to her litters, as well as her temperament for not being a truly natural poultry dog like Toby was, those two factors were the driving force that ultimately made me make the decision to have Abby spayed. And I acted on that decision sooner rather than later because I hated for the chance of having her go through another heat and having me risk having a litter of puppies that I did not want or shouldn't have had. Plain and simple, it struck me as the responsible thing to do. Now, in the video that I made where I talked about Abby getting spayed, I did also touch on some of the issues I had with Abby's breeder. This had been a situation that had been simmering for a couple of months, and while I didn't want to roast her publicly, I also felt like it was important for me to clearly articulate to my audience that my perspective on her changed. You know, when I started working with her and signed the contract to bring Abby aboard, I was feeling really good about her. But over the last 5 or 6 months, I was feeling less and less good. And because I'd gone publicly out on the record praising her, I also felt like it was important for the sake of my audience to correct the record and say that, hey, look, my feelings have changed here and here's why.
And because I'd received literally hundreds of questions from viewers about Abby,
I didn't feel like it would be an attack to be giving an honest update. Now, if I were to put myself in her shoes, I could see why she'd be upset by me doing that. But at the end of the day, I really did feel a responsibility to the viewers of our videos to be very clear on where my head was at in this situation. I didn't want my previous endorsement to ultimately lead somebody to see my videos and then start working with the breeder, even though I now had some new information and was not feeling good about working with her. And so that's why I made the video, and that's why I called out the issues I had with the hernia and talked about my concerns about some of her practices. But that video, along with a couple of other videos where I documented and talked about Abby's training progress, really set her off. And recently she's put out a couple of blog posts on her website absolutely roasting me.
I'm gonna put you on my Christmas card list.
Funny part is, even though she'll talk about Abby at length, she won't name me by name, which is weird, but yeah, it's me. So by my count, she's written more than 10,000 words about the situation, and so there's a lot to react and respond to. I don't think I'm ever gonna be able to get to all of it, but buckle up, because I do want to address some of the major points that she makes. Now, before we get into the meat of the allegations, I just want to get one thing off my chest. One thing that the breeder does in all of her blog posts is she uses quotations around things that I absolutely never said. But for some reason, there's quotation marks like I actually said it. And then the other thing that drives me nuts is there's quotation marks around things that don't even need quotation marks. Like, yes, I know that's super petty, but man, it drives me insane. Now, the other thing I feel like I have to say before I go into these issues is I am sharing this information to defend my farm. Please do not use this as a call to harass, bully, or threaten the breeder. That is never, ever, ever okay. All right, now let's get into the first issue. Point number one speaks specifically to Abby's hernia and the disclosures the breeder made around it. She absolutely did disclose Abby's hernia, and she absolutely did give me an option to choose a dog without a hernia. And I've said this before in previous videos. And the breeder had mentioned sort of offhand that it could be potentially genetic. But when I had a phone call with the breeder talking about my decision about choosing Abby, who she felt like had the perfect temperament for my farm, or holding off and waiting for another litter of puppies, she didn't seem too concerned about breeding this dog. And she knew 100% the reason that me, a farmer out in Vermont, was looking to buy a puppy from her, a breeder in California, was because I one day hoped in the future to breed the puppy. But what I've since discovered as I've done more research and learned and become more experienced is, number one, umbilical hernias like the one that Abby had are oftentimes very genetic based. And number two, if you look at Abby's litter specifically, there were multiple dogs that had that umbilical hernia, which when you think about the probability of that increases the likelihood significantly that the problem was genetic. But my bone of contention actually rests in the fact that I clearly approached the breeder as looking for a potential mate for Toby so that I could maybe potentially become a breeder one day myself. And in a few phone conversations that I had with the breeder, she really downplayed the concerns around it. To her defense, she's actually also gone on record and put out a whole blog post about it too, why she doesn't think it's a big deal. But that said, I have spoken to several other Maremma breeders, as well as 2 different vets, who have told me that there is a decent chance that it could be a genetic defect that's passed down, and particularly because so many of Abby's other litter mates had this issue too, that increased the likelihood of it being genetic. Breeding dogs that would potentially need surgery after birth is unethical to me. That's where my beef is in this one. And if there's a risk of that being there, I don't think it's right to breed that dog. You know, in the blog post, the breeder goes to great length, too, to say how much of a tragedy it was that I got Abby spayed solely because of the hernia. And again, I need to be very clear here. As I've said in previous videos, the hernia was only one factor. In fact, the bigger factor that really had me move towards getting Abby spayed was her higher than normal prey and play drive, which had her chasing and killing chickens.
Have you ever wondered why on a rainy day like today, it's perfectly okay for little goslings like this to be outside,
But it could be potentially lethal for baby birds that are in a brooder.
The reason for this is because the mama bird will often coat the baby birds in her waterproof oils, which keep them protected and keep them from getting too cold. Abby, no! No!
My goal for breeding livestock guardian dogs has always been to try to breed dogs that have the natural genetics to have them be excellent around poultry. Not good, excellent. I feel like Toby meets this criteria, and I was really hopeful too that Abby would also meet this criteria. But after working with her day in and day out for months and months, it was pretty clear to me that that was not the case. That doesn't mean that she's not going to be ultimately a good livestock guardian dog for our farm, and that doesn't mean that I'm giving up on her, but it also doesn't make me feel like she's a natural. Now, the breeder had told me that Abby had been socialized to poultry, ducks, chickens, and geese, and she's even said as much in her own blog posts. But for anybody who's seen our videos, you can clearly see that Abby likes to play with birds. And the biggest thing I've been working on with her from a disciplinary perspective is to try to break her of that habit, which seems to run pretty darn deep. Now, over the last couple of months, Abby's breeder has sent me a few emails about videos that I've made where I've talked about the situation with Abby and how she's performing. And in those emails, as well as her blog post, she's portrayed me as being uncaring about Abby and being mean to Abby because I'm critical of Abby. You know, the breeder has said that I've called Abby a disappointment or a failure, and I've absolutely received questions from viewers asking very much if I thought that was the case. But in each of those instances, I've gone on to say that I see her as the exact opposite of that. But I guess all of this brings me back around to the core question I started this video with, of whether or not Abby is a disappointment. And to be quite honest with you, she absolutely is not. If she's less than an ideal guard dog, and I'm now not gonna breed her, what's her purpose? What's her role here on the farm? And quite frankly, Abby's gonna keep doing the things she's been doing. I'm gonna keep working with Abby, I'm gonna keep training her, and she's gonna ultimately be a good guard dog for the farm. She just takes more work. And I've also said that as Abby's owner here, it's my personal responsibility to work with her and train her and get her to a place where she can be a successful livestock guardian dog on our farm. I know some people would tell me to just give up and get a different dog, but I don't feel like that's right. I brought her to my farm, she's now my responsibility, and so I need to be the one to put in the effort and energy and work with her. I feel like I've been remarkably consistent on that point in a variety of videos posted over the last several months. You know, the breeder made this allegation about me, saying that me talking about Abby not being the perfect livestock guardian dog would lead other people to abandon their livestock guardian puppies by saying that they don't live up to a certain standard. But I actually think I'm doing the opposite of that. What I'm trying to do is normalize talking about the challenges you might face with training a livestock guardian puppy. And by normalizing it and being vulnerable myself and putting myself out there and showing the good and the bad, showing that I'm absolutely not perfect and showing the struggles that I'm having, I believe that I'm actually making it more okay for other people to do that too, and for more people to be accepting of their own behavior challenges with their own puppies. I think that's super important, but in order to do that, you have to be comfortable and you have to be vulnerable. But again, this is where my heart really personally goes out to the breeder. You know, I'm somebody who's putting the contents of my life out on the internet on a daily basis. Criticism from commenters or angry breeders is something I'm just kind of used to, and I try to let it roll off like water on a duck's back. But that doesn't mean that strategy always works. And obviously negative criticism and comments do get to me and can make me feel down at times. But I recognize that that's part of the deal of putting your farm out on the internet. And while Abby's breeder was all too happy to accept the positive attention that came with Abby coming to our farm, I also had the responsibility of honestly showing the situation with Abby, much like I do with everything else on our farm, the good and the bad. And that meant, as things might not have gone exactly the way I hoped with Abby, that I had to show that bad. But I also think I'm in the wrong here a little bit because I've been too callous. I need to appreciate that not everybody has the mindset that I have, and some people can be a wee bit sensitive. And I need to take that in consideration, and so when I'm asking the question, is Abby a failure, or creating the works of art that are my thumbnails, regardless if my answer is absolutely not, someone like the breeder might see even raising the question as an insult to her and what she does. And I do think that that is actually a really important lesson for me in a host of areas, not just this situation. Paging Butch Spear, are you there, Mr. Spear? You know, collectively across various social media platforms, our farm now has more than 4 million followers and subscribers. With that amplified voice does come a certain measure of responsibility. I've tried to act responsibly in the past, and I just need to continue to work on being sensitive to the fact that not everybody might be as callous as I am. Now, in the last video on this topic I also made reference to having some concerns about the number of puppies that the breeder had been producing. And I do continue to stick to that concern. When I first made the decision to purchase Abby from her back in 2021, I was not aware of the sheer number of puppies that would be produced. You know, again, part of why I want to get into ultimately breeding Maremas is because I believe that those types of dogs are best when they come from good working farms. But again, that's just my personal opinion. Now, another bit of shade that the breeder has thrown in my direction in her blog posts, it relates to our very dear friend, Mr. Toby Dog, and specifically his registration status. And to be very clear about this one, Toby is not currently registered, but he is eligible for registration with the breed, and I've been working with the MSCA since this spring to get that process going.
Dog has papers. Over the line!
Huh? It is true that the purchase contract I signed for Abby included that stipulation that any breeding partners need to be registered.
Am I not turtly enough for the Turtle Club?
As if to say Toby Dog is not a real Maremma.
I just took a DNA test, turns out I'm 100%.
That breed of dog. And I haven't been in a huge rush to get him registered because I still had a long time to go before I'd even consider breeding Abby. Furthermore, Toby Dog has passed both the genetic health testing as well as his OFA screenings, which I did share with the breeder months and months ago, so I can only assume that it's her anger that's having her throw that specific shade. And the fact of the matter is I haven't even rushed to get Toby Dog fully registered because I haven't needed to. I would not have been able to do all the necessary health checks with Abby until she was 2 years old anyway, and I wouldn't have wanted to breed her any younger either, and so the idea that I needed to rush right out and get Toby Dog registered just never was a priority to me. With all of this back and forth, Abby's breeder did make the offer to me to buy Abby back. And what she would have done would have been, she would have paid me the full purchase price, which was $3,000, plus the $3,000 I had to spend to have Abby curried over here by our good friend Olivia, and she even offered to reimburse me for the cost of the hernia surgery that I had paid for earlier this spring. I flat out declined that offer because, quite frankly, I don't want Abby going anywhere. I absolutely 100% love that dog. She is completely part of our farm, and the thought of selling her back to the breeder is unfathomable to me.
Yeah, immediately no. Immediately no. Immediately no.
Like, there would be no way that I'd even seriously consider that. I have a lot of work I need to do with our girl, but she ain't going anywhere. But since the breeder did open up that door of negotiation, I did make an ask of restitution for her. It wasn't actually even ever my intention to make that ask, but she opened the door, so I walked through it. I asked her for
$1 million.
$4,000.
You greedy Americans. You think you're so entitled.
My thinking was this: I spent $3,000 to have this dog brought from California to here in Vermont. If I'd purchased the dog locally here, it probably would have only cost $2,000. For whatever reason, it just seems like it's way more expensive in California. And I would have never had that shipping cost. So given that I was keeping the dog, I subtracted that $2,000 from the $6,000 I spent on bringing Abby here. That's where that $4,000 number came from. My understanding was because the breeder was offering to buy back Abby, she was looking to make things right by me. Look, I saw it as a negotiation. I didn't want to make my opening bid too low, and so I assumed I'd get walked down from there. I was just trying to make a good business decision for the farm. But again, I never really expected anything and only made the ask because there was already an offer put on the table to make restitution by the breeder. Now, another accusation that was made was that I avoided reaching out to try to address this stuff, and it wasn't until she reached out to me that I started talking to her, and that's 100% true. Over the period of time that I've known the breeder, I've seen her get into a number of conflicts. And it seems like this conflict with me is only the latest one. She's made an entire cottage industry of putting out blog posts about our farm. And over the course of the spring, I received a number of emails from the breeder talking about some pretty wild conspiracy theories related to other folks in the Maremma Sheepdog Club of America. She actually even alludes to some of these conspiracies herself in her blog posts. But let me tell you, it was nothing like the tea that she spilled in some of the emails to me. It was this penchant for drama that had me actively avoiding the breeder. Of course, here I now sit in breeder drama.
You're a stupid man! A stupid man!
Ow, you're hurting!
But now, far and away of all of the grievances I have with the blog posts from this breeder, the one that has gotten my goat the most is how she's talked about Abby's living conditions. Which, by the way, I'm actually in Abby's kennel as we speak. You see, because Abby can't be trusted around the birds unsupervised, she does need to be contained. This is the exact same way I trained Toby. I kept him fenced in and kenneled in. Hey, Toby dog. How you doing this morning, pal? Huh? Did you have a good night? Yeah, did you see any coyotes? Hi, buddy. How are you doing today, huh? Yeah, how's it going? All right, we're gonna let the ducks out. You ready? You ready? Release the Kraken! Whenever I could be around and supervise him, I let him out and let him be around the birds so I could make sure he knew how to act around the birds. But he never had the opportunity to run around all willy-nilly. And by the time Toby was about 10 or 11 months old, I did let him be with the birds unsupervised 24/7. But that was because I could trust Toby. He had proven himself, he had a track record. I had given him a longer and longer leash before I ultimately did that. Unfortunately, with Abby, that just hasn't been the case. And that's not that I blame her, that's just who she is. But much like a parent who has two children that are wildly different in their behavior, I need to raise Abby a little bit differently than I raised Toby. And so that's why I built this gigantic playpen for Abby. I mean, just to give you guys a sense of things, right? So, right here, we've got a 10-foot by 20-foot by, I don't know, my tape measure actually stopped here, but this is 25 feet, so I'm gonna say like 30 feet almost. And actually, if you count these panels, they're 10 feet each, so 10, 20, 30, that's right. It's kind of an irregular shape, but it's roughly 620 square feet of space for her kennel. And I designed this space in a very specific way so that she'd be actually in the absolute center of our farm. All of the birds' food and water are directly behind me. The duck house is right there. Toby dog's house is right there. She actually shares an interior wall with the baby bird nursery right over there. She's not a dog who's locked away. She's actually in like the dead middle of our farm, surrounded by farm activity at all times as a way to train and desensitize her to farm life. And so when she sees chickens and geese and ducklings, it's not something that's new and novel. It becomes something she's absolutely used to. And she can even visit with Mr. Toby dog if she wants to. There's plenty of shade and protection from the rain. She has a little doggy house. She's got her food and water station. There's plenty of straw for her to lie down in. But then there's also dirt if she wants to go dig a hole, because Maremmas love to dig holes.
Armadillos keep digging little holes. And
I would love to have Abby out here running free around the farm 24/7, but she's just not ready for it, and it would mean the death of birds as well as failure for Abby, and I don't think that's really fair. And on top of her kennel setup, I probably spend about 6 hours a day working with Abby outside of this kennel. I have her loose anytime I'm outside here, and I can be within earshot to supervise her. That way, if Abby starts to get a little chasey with the birds, I can reprimand and correct her. And I have 2 training sessions a day that I do with Abby. You know, whether it's I'm working on obedience commands or if I'm just continuing to desensitize her to the birds. And then it's always really rewarding to see the sheer joy on Abby's face when she's getting to have her time outside in the pasture. But if you were to go off the blog post of the breeder who's never been to my farm and only gets to see YouTube videos and TikToks, you would assume that Abby has the saddest, most miserable life, which just isn't true. Now back when Abby first came to the farm, the breeder did suggest that I put her in with the cattle, which doesn't make sense for a host of reasons. Number one, my winter cattle area was not the most secure in the world. Maybe he's going down for a nap. Abby looks very interested in playing with him, that's for sure. That didn't work. And I could easily foresee a puppy creating a stampede and potential cattle breakout. Number two, a 50-pound puppy versus a 1,000-pound steer with 3-foot horns coming out of its head could have been a potential recipe for disaster and injury of the puppy. So again, another example where I don't think the advice that the breeder was giving me was very good, which also ultimately had me seeking advice and counsel from elsewhere. Now I know that I'm gonna never be able to address all 10,000 words of allegations that the breeder has made against me, but the last point I want to try to address is this. She keeps insisting that I insist I'm an expert. Across all of the videos I feel like I've ever created, I've made it pretty clear that I'm a guy who has no experience in agriculture. I'm driven by my passion to farm, and I've been working over the last 4.5 years to start this farm. Part of why I make videos like this is to document my process and show others the things that I've gone through and help them learn from my mistakes and my experiences. I am by no means an expert, but please don't let me saying that have you think that I do not have empathy for the breeder, because like I said earlier, I definitely do. And while I've found my experience with her to be rather frustrating, I think her experience with me is traumatic, and I feel really bad about that. And I feel bad if me talking about Abby has caused her distress. And so my biggest lesson from all of this is, if I see folks out there attacking me, I need to be the person to show more empathy. And so you're gonna see me doing that more and more in a host of situations. Now, as far as what am I gonna do about Abby, guys, the plan still remains 100% the same. I'm gonna continue to keep training her, and I know eventually she's gonna be an outstanding livestock guardian dog. It's just gonna take a lot of work and love on my part. But the good news is I absolutely love this pup. You know, while she might not be a natural poultry dog,
Natural police.
she has proven herself to be an outstanding farm companion. I don't know if you guys noticed this earlier when we were herding the cattle back in.
Abby, tranquilo, tranquilo. Good girl.
But Abby was doing a tremendous job of placing herself in a way related to the cattle where it kept them from moving backwards. She kept inching up, and she's learned some commands, which sometimes you'll hear me say tranquilo to her, which is my way of saying take it easy, so that she knows to go slow with the cattle. And she's learned that command super well. She's just a teenager, and she needs time and she needs patience, and I know she's gonna ultimately mature. Thank you to everybody for watching this video. I know it was long-winded, I know it was a lot of inside baseball, but for the folks who've had questions, I hope I've answered your questions. And as always, if you have questions or comments, drop them down below and maybe I'll do a follow-on or something.